And for more reaction on this, let's now welcome in our resident bracketologist, Jerry Palm. Jerry, I'll just start by getting your thoughts on the fact that Kansas is now the latest team joining Duke and Virginia that has to exit their conference tournament.
Yeah, we shouldn't be surprised if this kind of thing has happened. And in fact, Kansas left a couple players home from the tournament due to COVID protocols. They didn't even bring them with. So, we had a season like this. I mean, we had how many postponed games? Hundreds that eventually had to be canceled. It was unrealistic to think we were going to get through all of these conference tournaments without any kind of COVID issues. What is, I guess, unique about Virginia and Kansas is that they didn't have to pull out, and Duke as well, until after the tournament started. And most of the others had to pull out right before the tournament started. But it's not realistic to think that the NCAA is going to come out with a 68-team bracket with all of the teams they would like to choose and then go on to play those 67 games without any problems. That's just not the kind of season we've had, and we're seeing it now in the conference tournaments. It's a shame that Kansas and Virginia have had to back out, but I guess there is still some chance that they could play in the NCAA tournament.
Jerry, you're the guy that's updating the brackets, game by game as we go along here at CBSSports.com. I mean, you had Kansas as a three seed in the East. I mean, how does that change if they can go, or does it?
Well, it changes if they can't go. They have a late Saturday night deadline to let the committee know whether or not they will be able to clear the COVID testing protocols and be able to play in the tournament. So we will know by then. If they have to drop out, it's okay for the committee. They just pulled two names off the board and stick the first two teams out at the bottom of the bracket, kind of reseed everybody and go from there. It's not a cumbersome process for them. It's a disappointing process because you hate to have to do that. But until the bracket's actually released, they don't really have difficulty going through what they need to do to keep the bracket intact and put out something that at least has the teams in the correct order. Once the bracket's released, then if a team drops out in the next 48 hours, they pull them out of the bracket wherever they are. They take the first team out and stick them in wherever that team was, and obviously unlikely to be a proper spot in the bracket. Now you've got something a little unbalanced. And then 48 hours later, Tuesday night, after the selections, the bracket's locked down and there are no more changes. Teams just drop out if they have to.
In terms of the seeding, I mean, when you have a team like Texas that's now advanced to the Big 12 final, I mean, the championship final where they're going to play Baylor or Oklahoma State. Let's say Texas manages to run the table here. I mean, does that change their outlook in terms of where they line up in the bracket?
No, not necessarily, because the committee doesn't look at how far you advance in your tournament. Unless you win it, then you're automatic qualifier. They do need to know that. But the conference tournament games are just more games to the committee. So it's, each game counts as another game. It doesn't count any more than any other game. So it's ultimately who did you play, who did you beat, who beat you, but how far you got isn't really a thing to the committee.
Jerry, do you think we could see, I mean, I asked Matt Norlander this too, but I'll ask it for you as well. I mean, do you think we could see a point where, some of these bigger teams like a Baylor doesn't want to take the risk of playing against Texas, who played against a team that had a positive test and just kind of just goes through the motions in terms of the championship game because they're more worried about the bigger picture and getting to the tournament? Or could we see some of these tournaments actually start to be postponed?
Well, I don't think you'll see a team go through the motions. If you're going to play, you're going to play. If you're not, just drop out. I wouldn't be surprised to see that. I would not be surprised to see the ACC decide to wrap it up, or the Big 12 where they've actually had problems. But you might see some of these other conferences looking around and saying, hey, like, for example, the American Conference, where they may not get a lot of teams in. You would not want one of your 2 or 3 best teams to all of a sudden get COVID, and your league is now only putting in half as many teams as they might have otherwise. So you might see some of these other conferences at least take a look at whether or not they're doing the right thing.
Do you think the NCAA is doing the right thing in terms of what, having these tournaments kind of so close together in terms of the actual tournament itself?
The NCAA does not schedule the conference tournaments. So they schedule the NCAA tournament. And Gary suggested maybe moving Selection Sunday a week earlier so that the NCAA builds a gap between Selection Sunday and the start of the tournament. Maybe they could have done that. But the NCAA does not tell the conferences when to schedule their tournaments. They just take the teams when they get them.
All right, he is senior college basketball writer Jerry Palm, and our resident bracketologist joining us to discuss Kansas having to exit their Big 12 Conference Tournament Championship because of the fact that they have had a positive COVID test. Thanks very much, Jerry. Of course, there are contingency plans that are in place for the NCAA tournament, as the guys have outlined throughout the interviews here and the reaction to the Kansas news. Once the bracket is set, no reseeding, but nor will the bracket change. No contest rule, and if an opponent has a COVID-19 issue, conferences will designate pre-approved replacements, and teams among the first four would be the replacements for at-large teams with COVID issues. So Kansas now in contact tracing protocol. They've had to exit the Big 12 tournament because of a positive COVID test.
Want a sports network that delivers everything that matters about the game? The highlights, the picks, the instant analysis. No yelling, no fake debates, no politics. Hit the subscribe button and never miss a moment.